So, you may be aware that the CAS report has come down from on high. And it's very interesting to gauge what people think. Don't you think, Mabel? You've
Yeah.
got a certain number of people who think it's a holistic approach, it's sensible, it makes sense. But when you've read the document, haven't you? You've read most of it. When you read some of it, it's not actually as sort of inclusive for the trans community or positive for us as it may look. Do you want to go into some detail?
Absolutely, yeah. So there's a lot of worrying things in the CAS report for me personally. Firstly, they do seem to think that people who are working in CAMs right now are able to take care of trans people. And I think, for at least for my personal experience, but I'm sure other trans people as well, younger trans people know, it just really isn't the case there. When I was speaking to CAMs, it really was just a way to get onto more specialist care with kids.
Yeah, I think what it seemed to me was it was a lot of platitudes in the document, from what I can gather from the videos and stuff I've come across. A lot of platitudes, but not really much substance. So they're all hoping in the CAS report that the recommendations will be followed to make a holistic approach around the individual, the individual young person. But there is no extra funding. The GID centres are not being set up. It's going to take about 5 years for that to set up, isn't it, really, realistically? So for 5 years, there's not going to be really anything for trans youth at all, is there?
No.
Really? So I have a trans relative who's a trans guy. He's 17. He's not really going to have any form of transition outside of social transition, possibly until he's in his 20s now. And that's really bad. They've stopped the puberty blockers.
Yeah.
They took, you may correct me, Mabel, if I'm wrong, but they took 2 studies that were done in England and ignored the 20-odd so studies that had been done recently throughout North America and Europe.
Yeah.
Do you want to say a bit on that?
Absolutely, yeah. There was a very big focus on whether or not the studies were double-blind studies.
Yeah.
But of course, with puberty suppressing hormones or other treatments like that, it's very hard to be able to do a double-blind study, because subjects in different categories would find out quite quickly whether or not there are effects, of course, with this medicine. For example, if young trans boys stopped having their period or not, that would make it impossible to do a double-blind study. But nonetheless, they decided to just completely ignore what most of the studies, of course, about 20 different studies internationally, which did, in countries like Germany, for example, support the idea of using trans suppressing hormones and continuing that usage, which has been the case since the 80s now. And instead, we've just decided to go on a completely different path. There's been talks about a follow-through service, which would make sure that child mental health services would be increased up to 25 years. So their range would be increased to 25 years old. And again, there's no increase in funding. So how on earth do they think that a service is going to be able to carry on being the point of contact for another 7 years for people when they're on their knees already?
Yeah. And there's not the staff either. No one's going into that sector of studies. As we say, they're going to stop puberty blockers, but they're going to do limited trials. It's only going to be a handful of people, single digits probably. There's a lot of debate about puberty blockers, because really, I did a video on it as well. In the video, I said I started my puberty when I was 8. I had a precocious puberty. I didn't tell my family about it. I just dealt with it. The problem with puberty blockers is, for some kids, they have to be dispensed at an early age. And normally in the UK, before the ban was introduced, it was 16, wasn't it? They put you on puberty blockers when you were 16. So you're already well into your puberty by that time. So how much you're going to block the development of puberty, I really don't know. If you're going to do it, you need to do it when the child is entering puberty. But that's all stopped now. So there's not... The holistic approach And the recommendations of the CAS report were sensible, weren't they, for trans youth?
I think it's
In the
sensible to say
in
it.
the whole, yeah. But some people in the community feel like CAS was the report author was put under pressure by government to come out with the report they did. You really need to read the whole report, from what I can gather, to get a full idea of what was in it. I haven't read the whole report. You have. From what I can gauge, there was a comment in there, I believe, about possibly transing gay guys into trans women, wasn't there? They're saying
Not in the report itself, but they said that there's not a simple explanation
Yeah,
as
that's it.
to why there's been an increase in trans young people. I think there is a simple explanation though, because there's been increases in gay young people, people coming out as lesbians or bisexuals. It's that we're coming to the point where the government could be very against trans people or LGBT people, but the real life, which politicians can never really suss out the reality of, are able to accept these people. And that's why there's more trans kids, because it's more accepted. And people who historically might only be able to say, look inside an encyclopedia for the answers and maybe come across the word transvestite, have an entire internet now of supportive communities to get their teeth into. And that's why there are more trans kids. There is a simple explanation, and it's acceptance.
And the internet.
Yeah.
People aren't on their own anymore. When I first transitioned, you were very much on your own. And by about 2005, I was starting to go on some forums online. But they were very North American based. They weren't very UK based. And you had communities online, but there weren't really communities in IRL, in real life. That's a lot different now with what's going on. The community is, would you say maybe it's more united than it ever used to be? I remember when you would go into a place where there'd be another trans girl, you'd clock each other, but you wouldn't say anything to each other. You tried to pretend the other one wasn't there. I kind of think, like you say, it's more accepted.
Yeah.
The kids are going to do it because Gen Z are more open than previously. I'm Gen X. They're more open than my generation. I don't know if you have any other thoughts on the whole document itself. I just thought it was dressed up in nice language to say, oh, we care about these kids, we want this to happen, we want this to happen. But there was a big but at the end of it. And as we've said, whereas the services aren't going to get set up within a short period of time, they're going to be more regionalised. I think someone like my relative, who's a trans guy, he's going to have a hard time transitioning medically, probably until he's 25.
Yeah. I think there's going to be a generation of young trans people that are let down unless we fight for them. The entire LGBT community and the people that like to say that they're allies.
I think as well, as an interesting thing to say that came up is sort of a sidestep from this video. The teachers are ignoring the advice from central government on how to deal with trans youth in schools. They're just ignoring it. They are reaffirming their gender identity. They are supporting them. They're doing everything they used to do until the government handed down its guidance. I think that with the CAS report, it's more ingrained that trans youth will be subjected to less ability to medically transition, but in schools they will be able to transition socially. The schools are rebelling against the government. The government's already put some edicts out saying pack it in, but the schools aren't listening, teachers aren't listening. So I've said this before in a video I've done on my channel. It is sort of like a knockback. I think a lot of the transphobes are seeing this as a win, aren't they?
Yeah.
Not necessarily, but if you're trans youth, you're not going to be able to really realistically transition until you're 25. And what a lot of people don't know is that there is an adult consultation on transition coming out, and the government have asked for a consultation on adult transition, And so they've gone from the youth and now they're coming for the adults. So I don't know what you think about that.
A great time for the flag to fall down there. That is the feeling, really, that I've been getting there. I think in an adult consultation, especially if it's going to be lobbied by the government, the House of Lords especially, we're going to get a lot of those bad comments about how it's hard to put in words though, I'm pretty sure there was one person in the House of Lords who said that really no one should transition until they're age 25, because that's when your brain fully matures. And I think there's going to be, I think there's going to be at least some words about that, which is going to be really annoying. In terms of young people transitioning, not being able to realistically until mid-20s now with the NHS, from my own experience personally, I got referred to GIDS when I was 16. I started self-medicating at 17, and it was only last year at age 21 that I did get my first appointment with the gender identity clinic. So absolutely, I think that's going to go into the mid-20s now, just with the wait lists there, how there's not going to be any progress through GIDS at this stage because all the regional centres need to be set up for a few years. And yeah, it's just going to make the adult waiting list for young adults even worse, I think.
Yeah, it'll put a backlog on adult waiting lists, and so that will just run into the decades before you get seen, won't it? It's like the average wait time is 5 years at the moment to be seen by a gender clinic. Anecdotally, I have noticed in our circle of trans folk, a lot of us are self-medicating, aren't we? There is a lot.
In the UK in general.
There is a lot of us self-medicating. So you can see how the system is. You either go and buy it online from a reputable source, or you don't get anything. And so many of the people I know who are trans are self-medicating.
Yeah. It's cheaper than an NHS prescription, to be honest. Yeah,
it is. The holistic approach of the CAS report was good. The basic language was good. But when, as Mabel has said, when you dig deeper, there are some issues there that are concerning. And as we say, for trans youth, it's bad. My partner couldn't transition when she wanted to. She's have to self-medicate because the Charing Cross, as it was then, the Gender Identity Clinic, would not see her because of her mental health.
I think more of that could be seen too, because the CAS report does also talk about how there are, I think the word they use is comorbid disorders as well. So they're talking about neurodivergence there and stuff like that, possibly eating disorders. They do have a whole paragraph about worries with trans men, young trans boys there. So there might well be a long list of different disorders that could well be issues LGBT people do struggle with, but something that the services for young gender questioning people is just going to slam the brakes on their treatment entirely. We've heard a lot of that from sentences here and now with politicians, where they would say, well, autism's found a lot in these people too, and they're not mutually exclusive issues. Like, there are a lot of autistic people who are trans. That's something that we both know. There's a lot of left-handed people that are trans too. Yeah. So, I think there's going to be a lot of issues there from just having people's treatment slammed entirely. I want to know what a holistic approach really looks like if the main treatment, the gold standard treatment across the world, puberty suppressing hormones, is shut down. It's going to be things like, they've already mentioned exploratory therapy, if you've heard of that, where I think it's like, it's a very diverse, it's a very broad range of treatment there, but it's a lot of psychodynamics, trying to understand why things feel certain ways there, all kind of up in the air quite things. Maybe it's useful for some people, but I don't think it's going to be useful for trans people that do need to have their lives affirmed. They need to have their gender affirmed, their names and pronouns affirmed. We know that as a community, that's life-saving treatment right there. But I don't think that's what's going to happen. And I think that's why when the conversion therapy ban was being brought up back in Boris Johnson's government, why it was only going to be for lesbians, gays and bisexuals.
Yeah.
because they want to convert us. They want to try to turn trans people normal.
I think you can see that from the CAS report's wording when it comes to the mental health side. It's almost like they're saying, we're going to try and convince them that their gender identity is down to a mental health disorder and it's not really real.
Could be gaslight.
Yeah. And they're going to try and use any excuse they can to dissuade you from transitioning.
And that is conversion therapy there.
It is.
So they're not going to ban it. They might ban it for lesbian, gays and bisexual people, and it might just be half a ban, of course, because they don't want to touch the church or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's why they probably don't want to ban it, or why it keeps on getting kicked into the long grass, and why probably for the next few months now, as we're getting towards elections, for, well, you know, the elections, of course, in May, and whenever the hell the elections are going to be for the government itself, central gov, why there's probably going to be a lot of transphobic rhetoric on all sides, and why simultaneously there's going to be promises for banning conversion therapy, which we've been hearing for the last 5 years.
Yeah, it's not good. The environment out there is pretty hostile towards trans people. We make up such a small fraction of the society, but we get it on our heads. We're trying to stagger on, but things like the CAS report make us doubt. As you may know, Labour hasn't said anything positive. It's likely they will form the next government. You may have seen some previous videos we've done on this channel and the podcast we've done. Sam and I have discussed that hopefully they'll leave us alone for the next 5 years. Doesn't look like that, because the Labour government, incoming Labour government, will be responsible for setting up GIDS, and they will be responsible for allocating the finances towards it and building the premises and setting the whole thing up, as I've said. And it will be a litmus test to the new Labour administration, if they get in, as to how they deal with the wider trans community when dealing with this particular issue. I don't know what you think about that. Maybe you are a member of the Labour Party.
I'm not optimistic.
Nah.
I can say that much.
Well, you've got Wes Streeting now no longer defending his statement, trans women are women. You do get a bit concerned. So we march on, we do the best we can. Whether it will improve the services or just make it worse, it looks like it will make it worse for trans youth, doesn't it?
That's what I'm thinking,
Yeah, it will. And we just have to hope that the period trans youth will suffer before they can medically transition, they can get through it, they're strong enough, and we don't lose anybody else. Thank you.
Stay strong.
Yeah.
And now we've got a video statement from another member of Trans Pride Southampton, Hannah Phillips. So thank you again for watching, everyone. I hope you enjoy Hannah's statement as well, which is going to be added on to the statement with me and all of that. Thank you.
The CAS review hits close to home for many of those in the transgender community. Feeling like a personal and completely unjust assault on their healthcare rights. It is more than just a report. It is a blow to their sense of self and well-being. Imagine being told that you do not truly understand who you are until a certain age, and then being forced to wait many a years for healthcare that you desperately need. But as a trans person, it is about being seen, understood, and respected for who you are. These recommendations, the restrictions, they don't just delay access to essential healthcare, but also deepen the wounds and the stigma that transgender individuals already face. It is a painful reminder that our own voices are often sidelined in discussions about our own lives. It is clear to me and my trans siblings that this report isn't just a report, but it is a flawed assault at our healthcare rights.